So we are very happy to have these wonderful filmmakers today with us. Dάφνη Χαριζάνη, I'll start as I'm looking at you. I know it's a different structure for everyone. So Dάφνη Χαριζάνη with her film Sisters Apart. And Alexandros Vούλgaris with his film Jim. Τζόναθαν Κουάρτας with his film My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. Fernanda Valdez from Mexico with her film Identifying Features, and Φιλίπ Λακότ with his film Night of the Kings. Welcome everyone. We're delighted to have you here, although it's a pity that we won't be able to meet in person this time. Hopefully next year or in March, if you have a documentary and you want to send it to us. Let me just start by saying that this is a conversation that's meant to be for you. So I'm here to accommodate this, but if you feel like asking your colleague something or commenting something, just feel free. I would have said to grab the mic. We don't have a mic, so just feel free to unmute yourselves and just speak and contribute to the conversation. So if you feel ready, you can start by introducing yourselves and say a couple of things about your film. Daphne, you want to start, maybe?
Hello, I'm Dάφνη Χαριζάνη. I'm a Greek filmmaker living in Berlin. My film is about two sisters. The one is in Germany as a German soldier, and the other is in Iraq as Peshmerga soldiers. And they meet again after this circumstancing with the ISIS. On the battlefield, and the one sister is on the one side of the war, with the European side, with the European soldiers, where they help the Kurdish people there for educate them in weapons and all these things. And the other sister is there just to fight for their existence, and so they meet each other again in these circumstances. That's my film.
So, and it's called Sisters Apart, your film, and it's part of the Greek film section. And Alexandra, do you want to take a cue? Thank you, Daphne.
Hello. My film is Jim. It's my sixth feature. And it's a film that I made in very small time. Actually, it was with my students from the Greek National Theatre. We were about to do something for the end of the year, and we were about to do a short film shot in a gym, like an ensemble film or like a Robert Altman, let's say, kind of film. And because of the pandemic, we weren't able to shoot in a gym. So I wrote one monologue for each student. It's 17 monologues. So we end up with a 3-hour film with monologues of people that are actually narrating the film that we were about to do to the viewers. So we don't see the gym, we just see 17 people do very intense monologues. So that's the film. It's the faces, the monologues, and the music that I wrote. So, something like that.
Yes, because Alexandros is also a musician, known as The Boy. And there is also a link between, so it's as if all these characters are all going to the same gym. Some know each other, some...
Yes. It would be a classic ensemble film in a way, but we couldn't make it, so it became something else, which we prefer, actually.
Okay, adapting to the situation, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Alexandre. Hi, Georgie. We will get to you in a minute. Jonathan, do you want to speak a bit about your film?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm the director of My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. I am based in Miami, but we made the film last year in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the film is a dark family drama about two siblings who are taking care of their younger brother who has a mysterious affliction. And we're part of the international competition.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Fernanda?
Hi, everyone. I'm Fernanda Valdés. I'm a Mexican filmmaker. And my film, Identifying Features, is a road movie about a mother that makes a journey looking for her missing son, a boy that disappeared on his way to the border between Mexico and the United States. So it's a drama in the context of migration, enforced disappearance, and general violence in Mexico.
Thank you very much. Philippe?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Φιλίπ Λακότ. I'm an Ivorian director, and my film is Night of the Kings is my second feature. We presented the film at Venice Film Festival for the premiere, and Night of the Kings takes place in La Maca, the most famous prison in Ivory Coast. And it's a story of a young boy who arrived in this prison and who is obliged to tell a story all the night if he wants to survive. Yeah, so it's a sort of modern Scheherazade tale.
It's a modern, sorry?
Scheherazade.
Scheherazade, yes,
Scheherazade.
of course. Thank you, Philippe. Georgie, you want to take cue? Introduce yourself.
Hello,
and
hi, I'm Τζώρτζης Γρηγοράκης, Greek director. We have the film Digger in the competition. Digger is a story of, can you hear me? I don't know if the connection is good.
Yeah.
So Digger is the story of a father and a son. It's a modern Western about a father and a son who dig into mud to find the roots. I'll keep it short in terms of the synopsis.
Well, thank you very much. We will be opening up the conversation to questions from the audience in about 20-25 minutes. I will start by some thoughts I had after watching your films. But as I said earlier, whenever you feel like it, just pop in and ask or say anything you want. So because every film that we have here today is so different to each other, it was impossible to connect all of the films together, but I started thinking of how fiction works as a tapestry, as grouping and joining voices / stories, like in Jim, or like in Identifying Features or Sisters Apart, where you represent so many different stories by using fiction as the one vessel for voicing them. It's like grouping different experiences together via your characters. And while I was watching Night of the Kings, the first thing that came to mind was not Scheherazade immediately, but the Stories We Tell, a documentary by Sarah Polley, which is a title I really love, which is the stories we tell the world, the stories we tell ourselves to survive. Like in My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To, where it's a story about a story that was your personal story. Jonathan, now I'm revealing something, but maybe you can talk about it later. Or Digger, where the characters do something wonderful. They have their fixed stories in a sense, but they are willing to open up and merge their stories together. So you're all diggers in a sense, like digging motives, characters, stories. And I wanted to ask you to reverse the roles for a bit. So what's the story behind your story? What brought you personally to telling stories with films? So Daphne, I think you're...
Okay. it's I was not intended first to. It was not the normal way for me, because I went from Greece to Germany, and it was in Greece. It was, if you are good in school, you became a lawyer or something. And but when I was in Germany, they didn't really know what to do with me, because I was too old to go to the gymnasium, and so I went to an art school to make my baccalaureate, how you call it. And so I went in this world or something. And then I remarked that I have always, and there it was about music, about playing theater, etc. And so I went in this world, which was very new to me, because I had no background in these things. And but cinema for me was always something I grew up, because also in Thessaloniki, when I was a child, I went to the cinema and we played before the screen. We went with our parents and we played, and this was always a part of my life. And then after all, I recognized it. It brought something together. All this experience I grew up and with the films, because all the films for me in Germany, then they explained me also my environment. My parents haven't been really intellectuals to explain something to me there, so I put the television on, I saw these films, I tried to understand the language, I tried to understand the society. It was similar but not the same, and so it became a part of me very early, and so it goes further and further then. And I always think in films. I think it's some people think concrete. I think always in situation and films, and that I think it for me great.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to follow up with their story?
I think to piggyback off Daphne, I think it's similar story for me, because the love of cinema was instilled since I was a little kid. My parents would take us to the movies like 3 times a week, and we would always be watching movies. Me and my brother, who's also the cinematographer on this film. And I just think the artistic gene was in me, because my father, he's always been an artist, and he's always been creative, and he's always painted, and he's loved architecture. But he came to the States from Colombia in the 80s, and he had to find a way to support himself and our family. So he couldn't really pursue a career in the arts, and he had to pursue something more pragmatic, like business degree. But now it's been interesting, because he was a production designer on this movie too. So we've kind of become somewhat of a family circus on this. But yeah, I think it all came from the love of going to the movies, that we fell in love with the aspect of storytelling.
So it's a full-blown family affair.
Yeah. All 3 of us, yes.
Yeah, and your story in the film and the story behind it.
Yeah, it also deals with 3 siblings, which I have another brother too, but it's all based around a family experience, yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Fernanda?
Well, I think one thing we might all share is the love of films, and that's something that's amazing, that films can travel all around and tell stories, even despite our cultural differences. When I was growing up, we didn't have a theater, like a film theater in my hometown. But we did have like video clubs, like Blockbusters, and those places where you could rent tapes, and also a lot of piracy. You could go to a market and buy this tape about the film. Yeah, I think I've always loved films. At some point, I wasn't sure if I should study filmmaking, and I made a major in philosophy. but I very soon realized that the way I experience things and the way I think, it's not through I don't know, concepts and abstract thinking, but through stories. And what marvels me about film is that you get to connect to ideas and characters through emotions. And I think that's the main difference between like humanities and philosophy and sociology and all that stuff and the arts, is that you get to raise questions through characters that are experience real emotions, even though they're not real.
Yeah. Thank you, Fernanda. Philippe?
Yes, I was also, my house was also near a cinema, like some directors here. I grew up in Abidjan, and I was a neighbor of Le Magique, this cinema called Le Magique. And my mother, three times by day, my mother put me in this cinema when she wanted to go to make to go to make something, and she came later to take me. So I didn't watch a complete film in this cinema. It was always some different parts, and yeah. So I think that we can see this in my films, because I use a lot of stories and a lot of stories in one stories. But about Night of the Kings, who takes place in La Maca, in a prison, I will say that my mother was in this prison for political reason when I was child, and this prison is inside the forest, and I travel one day by week to go to see my mother, and I got a strong image of this place.
What was, was it impressed on you? What type of image was left inside of you that was carried on after so many years and made into it?
It was this travel in collective bus to go to this prison, and in this prison, La Maca, there is not private place. So if you came to see a prisoner, you are in a big room with prisoners, with visitors, and the proximity is very high. So it was possible to discuss with a prisoner, or a prisoner discuss with you, or a prisoner ask you something to eat, like this. So it was this connection. And for me, it was like a kingdom. It was like a kingdom with kings and with other person and with domestics. And I have this image.
Yeah. That's why you have this fantasy element as well in the film,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Alexandre?
I have some similarities and some differences from the other. To begin with, my family was working on cinema. My father is a filmmaker. So I grew up into film shootings and all that stuff. I mean, I was in film shootings before I can remember. So we have, as a family, a very strong connection with films, but also at the same time, because I come from a very political background of the family. Both my parents also were imprisoned, like Philip's. So it was something that always we have to deal with. And for me, politics were more one-dimensional in a way. And to cinema, I could see this something more multidimensional, you know, that you could say, you could talk about something and have, and be more real to the subject in a way, as I was understood it. So that's my story.
Very nice. Thank you, Alexandre. Dzώρτζη?
Yes, similarities and differences as well. I was never like a cinephile that I was. I mean, I had actually when I was really young, my mother's like holiday house, like village, was next to my uncle had a cinema. So I used to sneak in from the backyard and watch films when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old. But then cinema was not into my, like as a teenager, like I never went to the cinema. And into anything artistic actually, although my father is an artist. So, and I studied social psychology basically. That was my first degree. And in a way, I think the reason I studied this degree, somehow I see it in the way I make films, because I'm interested, in the same reasons I'm interested in relationships, to understand relationships with others, and therefore to understand somehow what's going on around me. And actually I studied social psychology, which was again, in the stories that I create, I like this contrast between a very personal story, but the background is very important to me also, the social context within which the story takes place. I find it quite important, and how the social context and the landscape at the same time, how it influences behavior. But studying psychology in a way, in a scientific way, was not enough. I didn't enjoy it so much. I found it quite limiting, let's say. It didn't have like imagination, and I also needed the artistic aspect of it. So yeah, I think I just needed something to express artistically that went into the. So I started basically loving cinema by making it, by doing it, by getting into photography, and this is how initially I discovered just beautiful images, and then I realized that with this you can also tell a story somehow.
Yeah. And landscape becomes like a character in your film, in a way. It's not just there, but it defines the story.
Okay. Yeah, because the development of the story went hand in hand with the character, because the first idea was a man who lives in the middle of nowhere, in the heart of a mountain forest, and has this enemy, and fights with an enemy which is a big industrial monster that eats the mountain and threatens his property. And that was and this weird dead end, basically. I was very interested in this dead end that this character was in. Because I don't know, μπρος γκρεμός και πίσω ρέμα, I don't know how to translate that.
Nowhere.
Dead end. I mean, the result of this is dead end. It's like, because he cannot leave this place that he loves, because if he leaves, he has nowhere to go, because all his lifestyle is associated, his identity is associated with this, let's say, forest in particular. And he cannot stay, because he stays there, and he cannot deal with that, because with that monster, he knows that he cannot win it in a way, so he's losing by staying also. So that was the character and the dilemma was intrinsically connected with the landscape. It wasn't like I found something and wanted to put it there. So in that sense, it also became protagonist.
Thank you. So we have already questions coming in. So I'm going to start for a couple of questions for Alexandros. I would like to ask Mr. Alexandros Vούλγαρης if the soundtrack of The Gym will be released at some point.
It will probably, what we're trying to do now is to release the words of the script, the monologues, in a book, in a book with photographs by Mirto Dzima, the photographer. So in this book, we will have probably the soundtrack of the film, also something like that.
Great news. And another question, which is slightly off topic. Does Alex plan to re-release Winona online again for us poor quarantineers?
I don't know. We'll see. Let's see.
Winona is Alexandros' previous film. That's why people are asking if they can see it again. One question for Dάφνη Χαριζάνη. How difficult was it to come in touch with the women in Kurdistan? And if she stayed in Rojava? Thank you for the film. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you too for the nice words. Yes, I have not been in Rojava. I have been on the other side, on northern Iraq. This is the corner Rojava, northern Iraq, over the Hook, and then Turkey, Syria. This is a triangle. I have been there 2017, and I made a big research. I spoke with women fighters there. I spoke with many people who has lost someone in this war, and also with the German soldiers who are training the Kurdish Peshmergas. And but this was a really big research. It was not so difficult because I had a Kurdish support there, and they have been very tough. They went with me in every corner of the war, and there was also I don't know how to call it, a military man who accompanied us because of the security reasons there, but we couldn't shoot the film there for security reasons, and so we shoot this film in Athens. And we shoot only 2 days. I have been with a cameraman in Iraq for the landscapes and also the destroyed village. We saw in the film this is an original village, and yes, but it was not so difficult when the people remark that you are interested in that what happens to them. They are very open and very warm, and what I also remarked is they have also a certain sense of humor also in this really difficult situation.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Okay, we have a comment about the gym. It was like the intro of Gaspar Noé's climax. Amazing. Okay, one question is for Τζώρτζης. How was working with Mourikis like Vangelis Mourikis, his main protagonist in Digger?
Working with Vangelis is always an experience. It's the 4th time I'm working with him. We've collaborated in 3 short films before, and in this particular project, it was the film. Oh, anyway, the film was written for him, and he collaborated in the script. Vangelis is someone who really, I mean, apart from being a great actor, he gets really involved. Like, for him, getting involved in the story, I mean, in the process of the writing is because he's really so much engaged in how he works for his parts. So, you know, he's a very experienced actor who doesn't need a lot in order to perform. And I think what he needs is, like any good actor, is like a solid directorial, let's say, structure, so that his performance feels clear and coherent. And I think I mean, not because it's our film, but I think he has done one of the best performances of his career. Yeah. He really, I mean, he really, you know, jumped into this role, and he gave a lot. And I mean, he really invested in that role. I think it was difficult for him, something different from what he has done before. And to me, that shows.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We have a question that's addressed to everyone. How important is film criticism for you, your cinematic development, and your relationship to the medium? Wow.
So, sorry, what was the question again? Sorry.
How important is film criticism for you, for your cinematic development, and for your relationship to the medium? Maybe Philippe, who's smiling mysteriously.
It's not important for me.
It's not important for you.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, this is my first feature, and so I think it's some of these criticisms still affect me, whether they're good or bad. And I'm starting to understand that just like film, the criticisms are also subjective. But I do think that it helps validate some of the things that I aspire to do in my next movies. If I hear something and they suggest something in a review, then I know that, okay, I can go through with it because it's validating something that I already want to do with my next work. But yeah, sometimes it hurts to read bad criticisms, but it's nice that just the fact that people are watching the movie and writing about it, I think it's a nice feeling for me.
Anyone else? Fernanda?
Well, I agree with Philippe. For me, I try not to read them and not to pay much attention. I think critics are more useful to the audience to suggest what to see and what's around. But I think because the film's already finished and there's really nothing I can useful get out of them. When I think opinions are useful is when the film is in process, and I think it's a matter, like an obligation of curiosity to explore and to listen to different opinions, but more of colleagues, I think, than of critics.
Thank you.
I want to say something because it was too short. When I say it's not important for me, because it's very rare for me to read a very personal view in a critic. Usually for me, it's a global vision, a general vision. When a director is very fashion, I will say, all critics love his work. And when you try to make something more difficult, but they don't understand, so it's not very useful.
Okay. Alexandre.
No, whenever I read a critic, or if someone says his opinion or his opinion to me, I always think about it, you know, and it can affect me emotionally. I mean, it can make me happy or sad in a superficial way, but it doesn't affect me in my job. I mean, I will never gonna say that I won't do this film or I'm gonna do another kind of film because a film of mine didn't get good reviews, let's say. Or I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna do something like that because this film, people liked it or something like that. So, I don't know. I like to read about film criticism, but not for my films.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Daphne or Georgie, do you want to contribute to this?
Because it's my first film, so I really don't know what impact the reviews will have in the future. For me, it's interesting to read it, for sure. Opinions about the film are interesting. I try to understand the point of view of the critique in a way. If it's a point of view that somehow shares or has similarities with my point of view, then I take it into account. So, because it depends on the point of view of the critic. Sometimes there is a political point of view, or an ideological point of view, or a social point of view, or a relation. You know what I mean? It depends on the point of view. Because if it's from a different point of view from mine, then I don't take it into account. I reject it. I find it interesting that sometimes when things are said that bother people, it's stuff that we have been considering and discussing from the script level. So it's interesting to see them being commented in reviews. So I think I learn at the same time. And some critics can really open, like some people write so well, and I was like, I wish I could, even the synopsis, like use this kind of words when I was pitching the film, or sometimes they even give me a thematic approach that I had never thought of. So that's super interesting.
So maybe you should hire one while you're making the film, and you promote it.
I'll consider it. It will help a lot. Yeah. So it depends. It depends.
Daphne?
For me, when I made my first documentary and it was in the Berlinale, I never thought I would make a feature film, and the critics were so amazing that the people take me seriously to make a feature film. So it depends, I think, and I think also the critics are, for me, a sort of audience, because they, like when I discuss in the cinema with the audience, I have the same feeling. Sometimes you share something, sometimes not, but it's also interesting to be in discussion and think about these things. And now with this film, I was sometimes surprised how human they have been and how warm. It also can be this part. It also can be hard, but it's okay. That we must also. It's an opinion from someone. I think it's okay.
Okay. So we have a next question, which is addressed to Philippe. Do you believe the Greek audience will be able to understand and acknowledge your cinematography language?
I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, when you watch Night of the Kings, there is different elements who are connected with the history of Ivory Coast and with the African culture. But all this part about mysticism and all this part about politics, about the political conflict in Ivory Coast. But I think that it's also universal. You can follow. I try when I edit this film or when I work on this film to have different levels. People who knows the history of Ivory Coast, and people who know nothing about Ivory Coast, and they could follow the story. Yeah, it's my hope.
Yeah, and I think it, because I have watched it, it does translate. I mean, okay, I Googled some things afterwards to know some practical history notes, let's say. But even if I didn't, I mean, there are such performative elements in the film that make up for everything else.
But it could join the last question. I never shoot a plan or a sequence and saying that people, the audience must have a knowledge of a critic knowledge to understand. I don't work like this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, Alexandros, was the music inspired by the scenes of the film that the characters try to explain to us, or by the characters' monologues?
I don't really know about that. The interesting thing about the music is that when I write the screenplays, I'm always listening to music, and I'm always listening to one piece of music. I mean, for each screenplay, because it keeps me focused. So for this thing, I was listening to a specific piece, and when we rehearse with the actors, I understood that I couldn't understand if they play good or bad without hearing the music. I couldn't understand the rhythm. So I kept hearing the music while doing the rehearsals. And then on the shooting, I also saw that I couldn't, again, understand if they play good or bad without hearing the music. So in all the shooting, I had the music in my ears for 10 hours a day, the same piece. So the music is very much linked with this film, because I like music in film, which many people don't. I believe that what makes Jim a film, and not maybe a piece of theater that is filmed, is actually the music as a feeling in this film for me. So I don't know. Now, regarding the pieces, some of them I wrote. No, actually, I was thinking of the rhythm of the words and of what I wanted to have as a feeling against what the characters were saying most of the times.
So, in one way, you're like that character of yours that says, "If you ask me what I like to eat, I like music."
Yes. Yes.
So you maybe identify with him. Okay, so we move on to a question to Fernanda. Your film is very beautiful, but very tough for the stomach. Did you find it hard filming such a difficult subject? And what kept you going?
Thank you. Well, I think what was more difficult was the research process, because we did a lot of documentary investigation into the massacres that have occurred in many states of Mexico, and the stories of survivors, and also the stories of the families of the people that disappear. I think that was the toughest. And then we tried to because I co-wrote with another filmmaker, Astrid Rondero, we tried to make a story that could summarize, I don't know if that's the right word, but to structure a story that could tell about all the complexity that we have in Mexico in terms of violence. And what kept us going, I think, is that we wanted to talk about the love and the commitment of the families, particularly the mothers of the people that go missing. And in this context of darkness, I think they really are a light and something hopeful in a very devastating horizon.
Yeah, and it does. I'm not gonna talk about the ending of your film, but there is hope there. So within the darkness that you're mentioning, but I also would like to add on that question by mentioning that the actors in your film are really amazing, and I have read somewhere that it was a mix between professional and non-professional actors, and I was wondering whether you could speak a bit about that. How did you work with them? How did you find them? Because they're astonishing, basically.
Well, I was very fortunate to work with Mercedes Hernandez, who is the lead actress, and she's quite an experienced actress, both in film and theater. But I think one of her characteristics is that she's really an actress that she's always in the present, in the moment. And that helped me direct the non-professional actors, because she really gave them stimulus and material to help them also be in the present. But we made, during the casting process, particularly of the teenagers, we had the help of an actress that has a lot of experience working with adolescents, with teenagers. So with the young people, because when someone is young, they're really just themselves. Even though they have aspirations, perhaps of acting or doing something else, they're just teenagers. And that helped me. The work she did with them helped me, like putting them in a state of play, I think. And they understood that this was fiction, but at the same time, the emotions were serious. And I think they kind of learned to do that, to understand that fiction is real in the emotional level, but it's not the real lives. But I did have the help also, like I told you, of Mercedes and David Illescas, who is the other professional actor, the guy that plays the deported young man.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one question for Daphne. Were you interested to make a documentary of Iraq or Syria's political situation?
Yes, it's interesting. I'm always interested in these things, yes.
Okay. And hold on. One question for Jonathan. Taking care of those you love, is it a prison?
I mean, it can be in a way. It can be emotionally devastating, but I think that just like a lot of the films here, there's hope as well. You know, there's the relationship between the tension and the negativity of a situation of taking care of someone who's sick, but at the same time there's love that kind of holds everyone together. And I think that it's bittersweet sometimes when you're trying to make these important decisions about someone else's life, especially someone's life that you love, right? But I think it's a mixture of emotions, but it can feel very suffocating sometimes. So I understand the comparison to a prison, but there's also a lot of silver linings, I think, when you love someone.
Yeah. Multidimensional again.
Yes, it's complicated situations.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Daphne, your protagonist is a strong female character, not a stereotype. Do you know someone like her? Were you inspired by a real woman fighter?
No, I made my research, but she is the connection of all what I researched and then what I developed. I made a research in the German army, and there I met two young women. The one come from Afghanistan and the other from Iraq, and they went back to with the German army. And it's little, and they went they went as German soldiers to the land where her parents are coming from, and this moment the subject started for me, and
Okay.
It's a little, for me, if I'm Greek, if you don't look me in the eyes, it's a little confusing because it's see. Okay, I'm not so northern that I can speak with her. That was the departing point, and then I made the research. Yes, but this is a mixture of all the people or all the women I met there, or also the other characters. It's not inspired by a real person.
Thank you, Daphne. The next question we have from the audience is to Philippe.
Elena.
Yes.
I have to go. Sorry.
You have to go. Good luck.
Nice to meet you, everybody.
Bye.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Γεια σου, Αλέξανδρο.
So the next question from the audience goes to Philippe. Someone says in the film, we won't make them our slaves, but our clients. And I was impressed by this. Is capitalism everywhere?
Yes, what I wanted to show it's in this prison there is a fight between two groups who will be the king of the prison inside prisoners, and I wanted to show old conception with Blackbird, the king who is sick, who use prisoners as slaves, and who organize a lot of games with violence. And there is a new group, there is a young group, and they refuse this system, not because they think that it's not a good system, not because morality, but they want to make business in this prison, and they want to use prisoners as clients. They want to sell something. They want to sell things to prisoners. So I wanted to present these two conceptions in the film.
Thank you. So I have a question. One thing that became obvious to me is that in all of your films, there is a great amount of tenderness towards your characters and the theme behind them and their stories. And I was wondering, do you believe, I don't know, it's just a question, can you believe that you can be a filmmaker without compassion?
It's difficult.
Difficult to be one with...
No, without compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the art form, compassion is a big part of it, not just in the storytelling, but working with a group of people for a set amount of days on a production. And I think empathy also plays a big part. So I don't know if you can be a filmmaker without compassion.
Yeah, I'm wondering too.
I think I agree with you. Of course, we need compassion. I think that's kind of the seal of art, that you feel through someone else's shoes, someone else's perspective. But also, and that's something that interests me, that when you are writing or when you are telling someone's story, you also have to be cruel, because I think you put your characters through situations and relationships and obstacles in order to tell a story, and also of cruelness, I think.
Yeah. So there is a kind of a balance there, eh?
And I think if you only felt empathy, that of course that's the main, like the base, because you fall in love with your characters and you really want to say something about them, but at the same time, if you only felt empathy, it wouldn't be interesting.
Right. Multidimensionality again.
Yes, I will say that if you don't love your characters, the audience will not love them. Yeah, so it's necessary to when I make a film like Night of the Kings, I love I'm very near the main character because I want to say something about him inside from him, and I use it also for protagonists because it's not necessary to say, okay, this guy is bad, but okay, he's bad, but he has his own view. And in his own view, he's not a bad guy. So you need to go inside him to say something.
Yeah, that's true. Daphne, what do you think?
You know, I think the sort of film I made is not possible. I don't know if other people, it exists also films which are more structural or something. I can't get in their thoughts or perhaps they need something different. I can't say it. I can't also only speak for me. So.
Yeah. So we have quite a nice cinephile question for everyone. Which filmmakers have impacted your work? So time to geek out now, guys. And girls, sorry. So this is a big silence.
I think Yorgos Lanthimos inspires me a lot.
Wow.
From the, he creates these mythologies. He creates these worlds that are very different, but at the same time, you can almost place them in reality. And I kind of like that dichotomy of having almost like a fantasy world, but you can make comparisons to the real world, and it feels like, oh, this isn't really that different from what we experience. And I think I carry that with me when I was writing this story.
Amazing. Fernanda, I can see you thinking.
Well, it's a very difficult question because there are so many amazing filmmakers, but perhaps I would say some that inspire me for this particular film. I think Nicolas Roeg was the way he edits and the way he shoots, and is very free about using the landscape and expressing emotions of the characters through the landscape. And I think Larisa Shepitko and Elem Klimov were really, really an inspiration for this film.
Great. Thank you, Fernanda. Philippe?
Yeah, it's difficult. There's many directors I like and who influence me. But I will say Andrei Tarkovsky. It doesn't mean that I want to be Tarkovsky or I want to make the same film, but it's a master for me. And I directed for theater. I directed his diary with Denis Lavant, with the French actor Denis Lavant. And yeah, it's always when I have a question, I go to see Tarkovsky work, his film, his diary, his book, Sculpting Time, and usually I find the solution. Yeah. So.
And since you mentioned him, Denis Lavant is also in this film, Night of the Kings.
Night of the Kings, yeah.
He has a small role, small but significant.
Yeah.
You cannot miss him. And Daphne, what about you? What are your influences?
I think every film that I see influences me. If I get in there, they have some. I am like Philippe. There are so many I love surely Barbara Loden, Agnes Varda, Hal Ashby, and also Cassavetes, because this was one, when I was a child, I saw this film in the German television, and and I was so surprised. I never saw something like this before, because in the television we had these westerns and criminal and big Hollywood, and then 3 men playing, and I looked with my brother and looked at each other. I said, what's that? Is that the film? And this was something touched me at this moment, but it took a long time until it's really real and so on. But I love every good film.
Sorry, I lost my words there. We have a comment about Jonathan. The fact that Jonathan is a Lanthimos fan, I love him. You've made someone love you.
Well, I think it's easy to be a fan. I mean, he's a more modern filmmaker, but I think he's really made a place for himself as an auteur.
Now they're gonna love you more, I think. So I don't think we have any other questions or comments from the audience. So I don't know whether you want to say something or ask something, the rest of the group.
I had a question or an observation for Fernanda. I saw Identifying Features. It was a wonderful film, by the way. So it was an interesting experience for me. And I've noticed this in other movies too, where the director decides to put subtitles. And this was particularly interesting because I know Spanish. So I understood everything that they were saying, but I noticed there were some times where there were gaps in the subtitles. And maybe it's because well, I want to know why you omit the subtitles sometimes.
Thank you, Jonathan. I also watched your film, and it quite struck me. I think about the subtitles because when you shoot in a language that's not English, and I think the subtitles play a big part in how you read the image, and some of the things that were said are more kind of in the environment than really in the meaning of the words. Then we chose not to put subtitles because I think it was more important just to see the image and to understand the sound. And also there's a part in the film that's spoken in Zapoteco, which is a Native American language. Because in Mexico, we have a lot of different languages besides Spanish. And we also chose not to translate that or to use subtitles because I think the image is the translation. And I think that's something that happens in all the films that are spoken in different languages and are subtitled. Well, sometimes they're translated, but when they're subtitled, then your attention is into reading the subtitles, and sometimes you lose what's happening.
Thank you.
So, Georgie, nice to see you again. There was a mix-up there.
Sorry, yeah, the connection went down.
No, it's okay. I think we are finished for the day. We don't have any more questions from the audience. Fernanda?
I wanted to ask Jonathan about the personal story behind his film.
Okay, so it's a story about codependency, but it's also literally a story about my grandmother, and it was about her death and the time that she spent in hospice. And my father has 9 siblings, and so it's a big family. And when she was in hospice, everyone came in, and it was a small house, and it was all packed. And there was a lot of, it feels like there's alliances, like people group together and they're in disagreement with other alliances, and it feels like a lot of tension. But at the same time, the universal thing that's holding us all together is that we're still a family. So I think that was important for me to address both of those things. Like it's a very, in my movie, it's very heightened. Of course, it's very, I used the lens of a horror film to kind of portray this metaphor, but I think it was still important to portray the love that the three siblings had for one another.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Daphne, Jonathan, Fernanda, Philippe, and Τζώρτζης, and Alexandros who left. And to the audience as well, a great thank you for all the collaboration today. It was great having you here. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow at 5 again for another session. Bye.
Bye-bye.